Welcome to Untold Black Legend. The silk is tightening around your wrists, not rope, silk. Expensive, deliberate, because silk doesn't leave marks. You're kneeling on wet stone in a chamber that smells like lamp oil and fear. The floor gleams, not from water, from something else, something you don't want to think about. In front of you, 3 doors. Behind the first, women are weeping, soft, rhythmic, music, like prayer. Behind the second, nothing. Just silence so thick it feels like drowning. Behind the third, laughter, the soft clink of wine cups. Voices discussing poetry in Arabic you barely understand. Your name is Catherine. You're 23 years old. 3 months ago, you watched your father die holding a contract he thought would save you. It didn't. Now a man in a spotless robe is walking down the line of women beside you, asking questions in music languages you know and languages you don't. His voice is calm, clinical. He's not choosing slaves. He's sorting inventory. One of these doors will determine whether you survive the next decade. One of them will make you wish you hadn't. And the worst one, it's not the one music with the screams. By the time this story ends, you'll know what was behind all 3 doors. You'll understand why 12 years from now, Catherine will stand in front of a sultan and say words that should have gotten her killed. Clears throat, and you'll realize something most people never learn about history. The cruelest systems aren't built by monsters. They're built by people who convinced themselves they were being reasonable. Damascus 1260. The Crusades are ending. But for the women left behind, something worse is music just beginning. 6 hours before the doors, Catherine's father made a calculation that would kill him. He was a merchant, a good one, the kind who music understood that survival in Ara, one of the last Crusader strongholds clinging to the coast, required relationships that crossed battle lines. He had contracts with Mamluk officials, letters sealed with wax and official stamps, promises written in Arabic and Latin music that assured safe passage for his family and his goods. He believed paper could stop steel. He was wrong. When the Mamluk armies breached the gates in the spring of 1260, music those contracts dissolved like ink in water. His carefully negotiated agreements meant exactly nothing to the soldiers pouring through the streets. The letters he clutched as proof of protection became kindling. Catherine's father died in his own courtyard, still holding a document with a sultan's music seal. Catherine and her mother were pulled apart in the chaos. Different hands, different music directions. Catherine screamed her mother's name until her throat bled and her voice gave out. She never saw her again, never learned if her mother survived the first week, the first day, the first hour. 3 months later, Catherine stood in that underground chamber with 17 other women pressed against cold music limestone walls. All Christian, all captured during the same campaign that erased Acre from the map. All waiting for a man named Amir Tashimor to decide their fates. Tashimor entered through the center door carrying music, no weapons. He wore the simple robe of a royal steward, but the difference shown to him by the guards revealed his true authority, his title in the Mamluk. Music administration translated roughly to integration specialist. Integration. That word appears in the official records with disturbing frequency. It sounds almost humane, clinical, like helping refugees adjust to a new society. Here's what it actually meant. The Mamluks had learned something during music, their own enslavement, that most conquerors never grasp. Human beings are malleable. Given the right music combination of time, isolation, and total environmental control, you can systematically erase one identity and build another in its place. They knew this because it had been done to them. Every music sultan, every emir, every commander who shaped the medieval Middle East had started as a slave. Boys taken from Turk tribes in Central Asia, from Scassian communities in the Caucasus, purchased as children, converted to Islam, trained in warfare and administration with ruthless precision. By their 20s, these former slaves had become elite warriors. By their 30s, they commanded armies. And when the Albid dynasty collapsed in 1250, it was a Mamluk, a former slave, who seized the Egyptian throne. This created a paradox at the heart of their society. The ruling class consisted entirely of men who'd been systematically transformed through bondage. They didn't view this as tragedy. They viewed it as proven methodology. If boys could be converted into warriors, then captured populations could be converted into whatever the state required. And the state required much. Soldiers, servants, artisans, laborers, administrators, music, and women who could perform functions that free women of equivalent status could not or would not provide. So they built infrastructure to process thousands of people annually. 7 major facilities in Damascus alone, standardized procedures, medical examinations within 24 hours of arrival, classification based on age, origin, physical condition, and assessed capability. Records tracked every individual through the system. Mortality rates were calculated. Productivity was measured. The Mamluks approached human acquisition with the same systematic thinking they applied to military logistics. Tashimor was one administrator in this vast apparatus, but what he did next would determine everything about Catherine's life for the next 12 years. 12 years, remember that number. Because at the end of those 12 years, Catherine would do something unprecedented. She would stand in front music of Sultan Kalawan during a public audience, a setting where women from the haram, quarters, music, never spoke unless specifically summoned, and she would say words that should have gotten her executed on the spot, words that no enslaved woman had ever said in public. Instead, those words set her free. But we're not there yet. Music were still in the underground chamber, watching Tashimor walk past Catherine without looking at her, stopping in front of a younger girl. Maybe 16 Armenian features, terrified eyes. He speaks to her in Arabic. She doesn't understand. Music, he repeats himself in Armenian. Her face drains of color. She shakes her head. He nods to a guard. The girl is led toward music, the left door. Door 1. It opens. Through it, Catherine glimpses sunlight, a courtyard. Dozens of women sitting in rows, heads bowed, while men in official robes examine them with the practiced efficiency, music of livestock me. Arshant's evaluating breeding stock. The door closes. Tashimor continues down the line. His selections follow patterns. Age matters. Origin matters. Physical condition matters most of all. But there's something else he evaluates, something less tangible. He asks each woman a question in her native language. The question varies, but the underlying test remains constant. He's measuring their capacity for transformation. The Mamluks understood music, something that modern psychology wouldn't articulate for centuries. Given sufficient time and total control over environment, human identity is far more malleable than most people want to believe. Before we open that first door, do me one favor. If this story matters to you, if you believe these women deserve to be remembered, hit the like button and music subscribe. It's the only way stories like this reach more people. Now, let's see what was behind door 1. Catherine had not been broken, not yet, but the system knew how to break people without leaving visible damage, how to erase previous identity while building new compliance, how to music maximize economic return while maintaining social control. They developed techniques refined over decades, music of practice. Door 1 opened again and again. Women disappeared through it one by one. Catherine watched, waited, tried to understand the pattern in Tashimor's selections. Then he stopped in front of her. His eyes were neither kind nor cruel, just calculating. He asked his question in Frankish French. His accent music was perfect. This detail matters. The Mamluks didn't merely conquer. They studied. They learned the languages of their enemies. They understood Christian social structures well enough to exploit them. Can you read? Catherine hesitated. In that moment of hesitation, music, she made a decision that would determine everything. She could lie, claim ignorance, hope that illiteracy might make her less valuable, might lead to assignments somewhere less terrible than whatever awaited educated captives. But something in Tashimor's eyes suggested he already knew music the answer. Her father had been a merchant. Merchants taught their children to read. Contracts, correspondence, records. Lying would only demonstrate that she lacked judgment. Yes, she said, French and Latin, some Arabic. Tashimor's expression music didn't change, but something shifted in his posture. He gestured to a guard who brought a wooden tablet covered in wax. On it, someone had written a sentence in Arabic script. Read this. Catherine studied the words. The script was formal, classical, a line from religious poetry. She read it music aloud slowly, her pronunciation uncertain but comprehensible. Tashimor took the tablet back, made a mark on the parchment he music carried, then moved to the next woman without another word. Catherine didn't know it yet, but she'd just been selected for door 3. Not the left door, which led to the courtyard, music, and eventual distribution to military households as basic domestic music servants. Not the center door, which led to immediate sale in the Damascus slave market. Door 3 led somewhere else entirely, somewhere that required women who music possessed education, linguistic ability, skills that made them suitable for what the music records called administrative household placement. This sounds almost merciful, like she'd been chosen for clerical work, correspondence, music record-keeping, and she had been. But that wasn't all. The administrative household track served multiple functions. Women assigned to it provided intellectual labor during the day. managing correspondence, maintaining account books, handling negotiations for women of the household who might not be literate themselves. At night, twice weekly, they provided something else. Something the system had calculated with the same precision it applied to grain storage, music, and tax collection. But I'm getting ahead of the story. 3 days after the selection, Catherine was music taken through door 3. She found herself in a different chamber, smaller than the first, its walls covered with carpets that muffled music sound. 5 other women waited there, all selected by the same criteria, all educated, all multilingual, all young enough to be reshaped. An older woman entered. Her name was Sophia. 20 years earlier, she had been exactly where Catherine now stood. Captured during a raid on Armenian territory, processed through the same system, trained in the same way, she had survived. And now she trained others to survive. What Sophia taught over the next 60 days was systematic erasure paired with systematic music reconstruction. Week 1 language. Not learning Arabic, Catherine already spoke some, but forgetting how to speak in ways that signaled Christian identity. Certain phrases had to be eliminated. References to Christian prayer, appeals to saints, even casual invocations that Christians used without thinking. God willing was acceptable. Christ preserve us was not. Sophia listened to their conversat. Ophia explained, her voice devoid of emotion. The household has invested in your acquisition and training. Resistance damages that investment. Music-damaged investments are discarded. Catherine had seen the markets during music her first week in Damascus. A brief excursion that served as object lesson more than orientation. The lower-tier markets where damaged music goods were sold at deep discount. Women whose resistance had marked them as untrainable. Women whose physical damage made them unsuitable for anything except the hardest labor. Women who would be worked until they died. A process that typically took between 2 and 5 years according to the mortality calculations that administrators music tracked with the same precision they tracked grain harvests. The message music was clear: submit to transformation or be transformed into something even worse. By week 8, Catherine barely recognized herself. She moved differently, spoke differently, thought differently. The constant music reinforcement had created new patterns that felt almost natural. When she caught her reflection in the polished bronze mirror that hung in the training chamber, music, she saw someone who could pass for a woman born into a Mamluk administrative household. Someone who belonged. This was the goal. Not mere compliance, but internalized identity shift. The Mamluks understood something that wouldn't be articulated music in modern psychology for centuries. Given sufficient time and total control over environment, human identity is far more malleable than most people believe. Catherine had not been broken. She had been rebuilt. Week 9 brought her placement. The household of Amir seized. Alawan occupied an entire music district block in Damascus. Calawan would eventually become Sultan. Though in 1260 music, he was merely one of Sultan Barbar's most trusted commanders. His household reflected his rising status. 37 soldiers, 18 administrative music staff, 43 domestic servants, and 11 women in the haram section, each with their own rank and function within the household hierarchy. Catherine arrived in a closed sedan chair, music, accompanied by Sophia and 2 guards. The transfer was documented. Papers changed hands. Payment was recorded. She had cost Calawan 600 music dirhams, a substantial sum that reflected her assessed value. Educated, trilingual, trained in administrative household management, the investment carried expectations. Sophia departed immediately after the transfer. Catherine never saw her again. Years later, Catherine would wonder if Sophia felt anything during music those departures, handing over women she'd spent months training to households where their fates would unfold beyond her sight, or if the transformation process that had reshaped Catherine had first reshaped Sophia so thoroughly that such transfers had become merely transactions, as mechanical as recording ledger entries. The head of Calawan's harem was a woman named Zara. She was not a captive. She was Calawan's first wife. Married when they were both young before his military career elevated him to command rank. She ran the women's quarters with efficiency that matched any military commander's management of troops. Every woman had a function. Every function supported the household's operation. Hierarchy was absolute. Catherine's function was correspondence management. The women of prominent Mamluk households' music maintained extensive social networks through written communication, marriage negotiations, gift exchanges, political intelligence. All of this required someone who could write in multiple languages, who understood formal composition, who could be trusted with sensitive information. Catherine's training made her perfect for music, this role. For the first month, the work was exactly as described. She sat music in a small room off the main haram courtyard, writing letters as dictated by Zara or the two other senior wives. The content was mundane: invitations, thank you notes, inquiries about silk merchants. She wrote in beautiful script on expensive paper, sealed the letters with music wax, filed copies in the household records. The work was boring, and boring was safety. Boring meant her value derived from skills that would remain useful for years. Boring meant the investment in her training would be protected. This lasted until Calawan's third son turned music 18. His father decided it was time to complete his education in all matters that a man of rank needed music to understand. The system had a term for this. Young men of military households were music expected to learn governance, warfare, and what was called household management. Household management included intimate knowledge that could not be acquired from wives of equivalent status. The solution, music, was systematic. Junior wives, specifically designated servants, women like Catherine. The practice was common enough that it generated no scandal. It was simply how things worked in households that could afford multiple women. Or let Catherine learn. She'd been selected for this function on a Thursday evening when Zara summoned her music to the courtyard after the final prayer. Zara explained with the same clinical precision that Sophia had used. This was an honor. This reflected confidence in Catherine's training. This demonstrated that music she had successfully integrated into the household. Resistance would indicate failed training and result in reassignment. Reassignment meant the lower markets. Catherine Music remembered what followed over the next 3 years was systematic. Calawan's son visited her quarters twice, music weekly on a fixed schedule. The encounters followed patterns that had been explained to her during training. She was expected to be compliant but not enthusiastic, responsive but not initiating, present but somehow absent. The emotional disconnection was the point. These were not relationships, they were educational procedures. Catherine developed the dissociation techniques that women in her position had developed for generations. The ability to observe herself from outside music, to be present in body while sending her consciousness elsewhere. She perfected the art of performing required music responses while thinking about letter composition, about Arabic grammar, about anything except what was actually happening in that small room twice each week. The Mamluks had calculated this too. They understood that women in such positions needed psychological survival mechanisms. They didn't discourage dissociation, they encouraged it. Women who could mentally separate themselves from physical experience were more durable, more sustainable, better long-term investments. The system read women who could endure indefinitely over women who broke quickly and required replacement. During the day, Catherine Music continued her correspondence work. She became extraordinarily skilled. Her calligraphy was admired throughout Damascus. She could compose in 4 languages with equal facility. She managed sensitive negotiations regarding marriage alliances with diplomatic music subtlety that impressed even Zara. Her value increased year by year. At night, twice weekly, she reported to the small room and performed the function for which she had also been acquired. The duality music was the system working exactly as designed. Women who provided multiple forms of value simultaneously represented music optimal return on investment. Catherine was correspondent clerk, an educational resource. Her literacy made music her useful during daylight hours. Her controlled availability made her useful during designated evening hours. She was, from the household management perspective, a success story of the acquisition and training process. From Catherine's perspective, she was surviving month by month, year by year. She learned not to count the days. Counting made time feel endless. Instead, she marked time by music external events. When Calawan became Sultan in 1279, when his son married and stopped requiring her educational services, when she was assigned to train music, a newly acquired Armenian girl in correspondence management. That last assignment broke something in her that 3 years of systematic exploitation had failed to touch. Looking at the Armenian girl freshly processed through the transformation system, seeing her own past reflected in terrified eyes, Catherine realized she had become Sophia. She was now the instructor, the one who would train the next acquisition to accept what Catherine had accepted, the one who would explain with clinical precision what functions the girl would perform. She could not do it. The household maintained a tradition that senior members could petition the Sultan directly during weekly public audiences. This was a legitimizing practice, a way for the ruling Mamluks to demonstrate their accessibility despite absolute music power. Most petitions were mundane: tax disputes, inheritance claims, commercial disagreements. They were heard, music decided, recorded. Catherine attended these audiences music as part of her administrative duties. She took notes on petitions for the household records. She'd done this dozens of times. No one paid attention to her. She was furniture, another piece of the vast administrative music apparatus that kept the Mamluk state functioning. On the third day of October 1284, Catherine stood during a pause in petitions and spoke directly to Sultan Kalawan. The chamber went silent. Women did not speak at public audiences music unless specifically called upon. Certainly not women from the haram sections of music households. Certainly not about their own situations. The violation of protocol was shocking enough that the guards didn't immediately stop her. Catherine, music, spoke in perfect Arabic. She had rehearsed this for weeks. I petition for manumission on the grounds that I have served the Emir's household with distinction music for 12 years, have provided valued services including the training of staff, have performed all required functions without resistance or complaint. I request transfer to the status of freed servant with continued employment in the correspondence music office. The petition was legally sound. Islamic law regarding slavery included provisions for manumission after long service, particularly for enslaved persons who had demonstrated exceptional utility and compliance. Catherine had researched extensively. Music, she had found precedents. She had documented her own value through the correspondence records she maintained. She had also done something unprecedented. Enslaved women did not petition music for their own freedom. They certainly did not do so in public audience, where refusing the petition would require Callan to music publicly explain why a woman who claimed to have served faithfully for 12 years did not deserve consideration. The calculation was deliberate. The setting was music tactical. The legal framework was solid. Catherine had applied everything she'd learned about Mamluk administration, about Islamic jurisprudence, about household hierarchy, to construct a petition that was difficult to refuse without appearing unjust. Calawan stared music at her for a long moment. His face revealed nothing. Then he turned to his chief Qadi, music, the Islamic judge who advised on legal matters. Is this petition legally formulated? The Qadi reviewed the precedents Catherine had cited. Music checked them against his own records. Finally he nodded. The petition is sound. Manumission after faithful service is prescribed. The petitioner has documented her service. The household has benefited from her labor. The legal requirements are satisfied. Calawan could have refused anyway. Why sultanic authority superseded legal niceties when necessary. But refusing would have implications. It would suggest that faithful service meant nothing. That the legal frameworks he claimed to uphold were empty formalities. That the Mamluk state, built on systematic music transformation and earned advancement, did not actually reward merit. He granted the petition. Catherine Music was freed that afternoon. The documentation was prepared. The official seal was applied. She was transferred to paid employment in the correspondence office at a salary of 12 dirhams per month. She was assigned a small music room in the administrative wing of the compound. She was no longer anyone's property, but the cost was everything else. She could never return to Accra. The Frankish territories were gone, conquered. Her family was dead or scattered. She had no community except the Mamluk system in which she'd been embedded for over a decade. She had no identity except the one that had been built during those 60 days of training. She was free in a technical music sense, but freedom meant only that she could not be sold. She still lived in the same household, still performed the same work, still existed entirely within the structure music that had acquired and transformed her. But she had chosen that mattered. The petition had been her decision. The words were hers, the consequences were hers too. After 12 years in which every hour was scheduled, every gesture monitored, every reaction expected, she finally acted on her own will. Nothing dramatic, nothing loud, just a refusal. A single decision made inside a system designed to erase decision-making altogether. The victory was microscopic, but it was real. The Armenian girl she refused to train was removed from her care and transferred to another household, where someone else finished what Catherine had begun. That outcome haunted her more deeply than any punishment she herself endured. Not the pain she knew, but the uncertainty she never would. Was the girl treated better or worse? Catherine would never know. And that ignorance became its own sentence, a permanent reminder that even resistance, however small, carries consequences beyond our control. She had chosen, and in a world constructed to deny choice entirely, that alone mattered. Before we turn to the thousands of other women who passed through those same 3 doors, women whose lives splintered in countless directions under the same organized brutality. You need to understand something clearly. These women existed. Their names appear in administrative lists, court documents, household ledgers, dry records later historians often minimized, softened, or ignored altogether. If you believe their lives deserve to be remembered honestly, not romanticized, not cleaned for comfort, not reduced to abstractions, then subscribe now. Every subscription is a refusal to let historical truth be buried beneath convenience. Comment Catherine. If her story stayed with you. Now let's continue. Catherine of Acre died in Damascus in 1315. She was 63 years old. She never returned to Era. She never found her family. She never fully shed the identity forced upon her during those 60 days of training, but she lived. And within the narrow space allowed to her, she taught young women to read and write. She passed on knowledge that might otherwise have disappeared entirely. She lived with little and with dignity. Her story is not a simple tragedy, nor is it a clean narrative of survival. She was broken in ways that never healed. She was also shaped into someone who learned how to move through the system that once controlled her, and eventually, how to slip beyond its absolute grip. Both truths exist at the same time. Her name survived because of chance, a single line in a household ledger recording her manumission in 1284. That document survived by accident, stored in an overlooked archive, rediscovered in 1953. Most women who passed through the Damascus processing center left nothing behind. No names, no records, no witnesses. Catherine did. The cruelest systems are not built by monsters. They are built by ordinary people performing assigned roles, clerks, trainers, guards, without ever confronting the accumulated horror their obedience creates. That capacity did not vanish with the Mamluk Sultanate. It remains embedded in human societies whenever efficiency is paired with moral permission and institutional power. Remember their names, remember what systems can do when good people decide not to look, and remember this. Sometimes the smallest act of defiance, a single sentence spoken in a silent room, is the only victory that history allows.